Welcome to the Happy Dog, Happy Human podcast, where we explore the intersection between human mental health and our relationships with dogs. This is Sharon.
And I'm Angela. In season 2, we're exploring social and cultural phenomena that impact our well-being so we can reduce stigma and challenge the status quo, while also learning better ways to care for ourselves and our dogs throughout the journey. We hope you love it. Hi, I'm Angela.
Hey, this is Sharon. And on today's podcast, we're going to talk about how urgency culture impacts our relationships with dogs.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So a little recap on what urgency culture is. There's urgency, which is this feeling that it's like a feeling of tension and anxiety that something has to happen right now. And that feeling is present in emergencies, and those are really urgent. But there are also situations that aren't emergencies in which we feel that sense of like needing to move fast or get something done. And the urgency culture is how in society we actually prioritize moving faster or getting things done really fast, or prioritize being busy and productive over resting, playing, just being. And so we're going to explore how that shows up in our world with dogs.
That was a great recap. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
So before we get into this conversation, should we take a few breaths?
Yeah, I would love that. Help us
Me
slow
too.
down a little.
Yeah, because I'm always going way too fast. That's the irony with these urgency episodes.
I know. Yeah. It's good to just slow down and breathe for
Yes.
a couple seconds.
Let's do it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Angela, for reminding us to do that. That was so great.
I think that's the first moment of silence I've had in days.
Wow.
That was really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you don't realize like how little you slow down until you slow down.
Yeah, absolutely. And we live in very easily overstimulating lives because so much is going on.
Mhm.
And I think that plays a huge part in urgency culture, of course, that our environments have become overstimulating in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like when we're moving faster, we are exposed to more stimulation, and like slowing down is like being exposed to less stimulation.
Yes, that is also a good way of putting it.
Mhm.
So dogs, and urgency. I feel like, well, it's interesting. I feel like it shows up in two ways where we are pushing our own urgency agenda on our dogs.
Mhm.
So, for example, the one that immediately pops to mind is when we're going for a walk with dogs and we want them to hurry up because we have something to do and something to get to.
Mhm.
And we pull them even though they need to pee or they want to sniff around, an area for a little bit longer than we would like them to. So
Mhm.
I think that's like a very clear example.
Mm.
And then I think the flip side of it, which we can talk more after we talk about the first side, but I'll mention it now because we will talk about it, is that dogs themselves feel a sense of urgency.
Mhm.
That might be instinctual. or might also have to do with how we impose our lives onto them. So we can look into that afterwards.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting back to your first example, I think that's so relatable. Like, there are so many times that I've been walking Muggins and they're like sniffing something, and I'm like, hurry up, we gotta go. One of the times that it shows up a lot is when we're in our for our morning walk. Sometimes we will meet up at this park and play with friends, and the friends tend to get there really early in the morning, and so I'm like, Muggins, like, we got to get there. We got to get there to see our friends. And sometimes Muggins has that like same agenda, like, we've got to get there, and they're like pulling me because they remember like we're going to see the friends. And then other days Muggins is like, I don't know, like a different dog walked by and now they're like really distracted and want to smell where that dog was. And we have these like conflicting agendas, you know, like of what we are hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love how you just talked about Muggins being much more flexible in the way that they switch from one thing to another. And it made me think about how when we're feeling a sense of urgency, it really feels like it's a one-track mind. Like, this needs to get done right now. And it's a
Yes.
very inflexible way of thinking and behaving. When you have that, like, I must get to the park and there is no
Mhm.
stopping.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah, you definitely feel like, or I feel like this is the thing that must happen. There is no other option.
Yeah, I mean, I'm small story, but coming to this podcast meeting, I knew I was going to be a little bit late for the recording, but I had it in my mind also, like, I must go home right now. And then I realized, well, I actually need to eat something. And it was actually very difficult for me to do what Muggins did and say to myself, okay, we need to stop and get some food because otherwise that's not going to be good later because you'll be hungry
Mhm.
and dizzy and you can't think straight, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that sentiment actually from your story with Muggins. It's not something I had thought about.
Mhm. Yeah. And I really appreciated you texting me to let me know that you were running late because I was rushing to like get ready because we're like, it's the beginning of my day. And so I was doing a bunch of things. I was like vacuuming because my nephew's coming to visit, and I was like trying to get my tea and get dressed. And I was like, I gotta get there on time. And then I got your text, and I was like, oh, that's so wonderful. I have an extra 10 minutes.
That's awesome. Well, and that's the irony in that too, right? Like, hashtag urgency, we're all running around to get
Mhm.
to something, but I think sometimes it feels nice to be let off the hook, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're ever afraid to like let someone know you're running late, or like, just do it because they're going to be
Do
happy.
it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Um, well, and it's funny also, I was just thinking about the getting ready in the morning. I think now that I have three dogs living with me and a toddler, and we wake up and I feel urgency of getting everybody ready in the morning. Like, that's always a time of day, I think many people feel urgency, right? Like, you got to stuff some food in, got in the car, beat traffic. If you have dependents, you got to feed them, you got to take them somewhere, school or doggy daycare, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I feel the urgency in that too, where I want them to hurry up and finish eating. Like, we need to get in the car. Like, don't go sniffing around the backyard. You need to get in the car. Um, so that's definitely another way I think I impose or feel a sense of urgency related to the dogs.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. And it's interesting that it comes up with eating and sniffing, like two things that are extremely necessary for survival. I think for both humans and dogs, you know, like eating, obviously, we all need to eat. And it's something that we like push down on our list of priorities, like, oh, I'll just eat later, or I'll just grab something on the go. And we don't, like, I know for myself, it's really hard for me to just sit and just eat and not do something else at the same time.
I'm massively nodding because I'm like notorious. Ask any of my friends for just inhaling my food and beverages.
Mm,
And yeah, like you said, like I think so much of today's world, we're multitasking, right?
yeah.
Because we feel like we have a long list of things to do and we want to cross those things off. And, even this morning I was walking the dogs and I just was just saying to myself, like, don't go on your phone, just walk to your destination and then you can maybe go on your phone. But it's really hard. Like it's so hard when we have access, such easy access to multitasking and to being distracted and to like zone out of the moment.
Yes, yes. Especially when the dogs are like doing something that maybe we're not doing with them, like sniffing around or something. Like I know
Yes.
that like we don't prioritize that because we feel like, oh, they're like, I don't know, maybe we don't even think about it, like why they're doing that. We're just
Well,
like,
it requires patience from us because we have to stop and wait.
yes, exactly. And that's hard, especially when we're not getting the information that the dog is getting, or like we don't really have a way of even comprehending how much information they are receiving and gathering by doing that sniffing. So it's hard to like feel like it's important.
Yeah, that also makes a lot of sense. And um, advocating for dogs, of course, that they also deserve to have moments of pleasure and happiness and not be pulled around everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if we don't understand why something is pleasurable or important to them.
Right. It's like me getting my nails done for self-care and my husband not understanding why.
Uh-huh.
That he
Yeah.
needs to be patient with me, that I need those, 2 hours once a month to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hmm. I'm thinking of other ways that our urgency impacts the dogs. And one of the things I'm thinking about also has to do with like speed, but like speed of listening to what we say. Right. And this can show up when the dog is sniffing, right? They're sniffing something and you're like, okay, let's go. Let's continue the walk. And then the dog just keeps sniffing and they don't respond right away. But also in dog training in general, when I first learned to be a dog trainer, I was taught that you ask the dog to do something one time, and if they don't do it, then you correct them. Like
Mm.
there's this time limit, right? This time frame in which they are supposed to respond. And if they don't do it in that time, then they are bad or wrong and need to be punished.
I'm thinking a lot about Duchess and her early years when you talk about that. And I think there was such an urgency on my part for her to quote unquote get better.
Mm.
And I think actually I put a lot of pressure on the trainer at the time. Well, he was a behaviorist, who was teaching me uh I was gonna say tricks, but skills to work with her in a way that would help develop her confidence and her identity and feeling safe when I'm not around. And those are things that don't get better. Well, better. There are things that don't improve, let's say, or develop overnight, and that's over her lifespan, right? Like that's not just your classic obedience training. And I mean, so many people turn to things like obedience training and authoritative parenting, for example, with children, because it is effective in the short term, right? It is effective, but in the long term, what are we really doing to um, dogs and humans?
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's all comes from a sense of urgency, I think, a desire for a certain behavior to occur now.
Right. That's so true. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. How, especially the part about how like you felt like you were pressuring the the behaviorist who is helping you, because I relate to that so much. I feel a lot of pressure from clients. Usually it's in the initial call, right? They're calling to get to know me and they want to know what I offer. And sometimes when I explain my co-regulation program, and I go into like all the things that I teach the humans and the skills that we develop, and how we like really zoom in on communication and self-regulation, people are kind of sometimes like, oh wow, that's like really involved. Or people have told me, people have chosen not to work with me and have said, oh, it just sounds like that's going to take a long time. And so then I feel pressure to like be like, no, like you're going to have results right away. You know what I mean? And I believe that like there are things that you are going to see improvement in right away when you shift to really focusing on the relationship with your dog and not just the dog listening to what you're saying. But also it is a lifestyle shift, and there are long-term changes that you need to make or that you can make. And sometimes there are additional results that are going to only be seen over time.
I mean, it's very similar to personal development, right? Like if we compare this to humans, it's same as therapy. People, I used to have that as a therapist too. People come in and they want the magic wand, and I would have clients, quote unquote, fire me because I couldn't fix their problems, because I'm not there to fix their problems. And to go back to this previous behaviorist that I worked with, he had told me that many of his clients would say to him, here, train my dog.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's very common, right? You
Right,
do
yeah.
it.
Do it for me. I used to do that.
Do it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But because it's quite normal, right? Like, because I don't have time to do it. I mean, it's the same thing as like, not to bash on nannies. If I have another kid, I'll definitely get a full-time nanny. But sometimes, people use nannies to raise their children and not invest in the relationship. And then they wonder later, why does my adult child not want to have a relationship with me? Well, you didn't invest in it, right? So it's similar with dogs. I mean, it's the same thing. It's a relationship with another living being, creature.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I always tell people that like now I don't take people's dogs from them. I work with people by teaching them how to train their own dog. And so what I tell people is that like you are already interacting with your dog. Like sure, there are extra things that you're going to need to do to develop skills, but you can also just tweak and change the way you're already interacting with them. And that can do a lot to improve your dog's behavior without taking extra time.
Well, I would love to give a personal example, because I think we talked about in the last one. I'm actually going through Sharon's program right now. And we've only met once.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, of course, at first it does maybe feel like, okay, now we have homework, right?
Yeah.
And like, that's always a little like, oh my gosh, okay, now I have to think about doing this. But I realized right away, when I was with Duchess, I learned one, I keep wanting to say trick. I'm just going to say it, one trick, one game to do with her. And I realized, and actually my husband also did it on his own, that there are moments where we're getting mad at her, yelling her name, trying to get her attention to stop. And instead of doing that, let's do this game.
Oh yeah.
And so there is no way, extra time, because I'm wasting my time interacting with her like that. I mean, my dad, funny enough, was like, do you think screaming her name for the last 8 years you've been doing that when she barks, has that done anything? And I was like, you're right.
Good point.
You have a point, because I'm like trying to get her attention, of course, right? I'm just like, Duchess, and I say very loud to get her attention, but it hasn't worked. And so that's how my husband and I separately actually reframed it as let's do the game now instead of yelling her name and running after her
Yes.
to be quiet right now.
Right.
But instead it's let's do the game right now.
Yeah.
And it's something to do, and it's much less stressful, and gives a sense of direction that we couldn't have figured out on our own. So that's my plug for Sharon's program. Okay, thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That warms my heart so much. And I really love that you are thinking of it as a game because it should be fun. And that's the whole idea, is to like remove the stressful thing and insert something that's fun, and like the ripple effect of that. I'm so curious, like how, or like to see over time how that ripples across your whole life and supports you in ways that maybe we didn't even think about.
Yeah, maybe. And in general, of course, that improves my relationship with my dog, because I'm not getting into this sense of urgency, going back to the topic of you need to stop this behavior right now. And like, why do I feel that way? Why do we feel a sense of urgency? We talked about it a little bit last time. Of course, there's like cultural implications of like what we feel like we need to get done in a day, et cetera, et cetera. But I also really, truly believe, and I said it last time, that it's a way of numbing. We feel bad and we want it to end. And so we have a sense of urgency when it comes to that. And, if your dog is barking or like trying to attack someone, you get flustered and you go into fight or flight. And urgency is fight or flight. It's that tunnel vision. And yeah, so we need some ways to combat that, which we'll talk about after our break later.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that that Duchess is barking in these situations where you're shifting to use a game instead of trying to get her to stop. And so it sounds like, in addition to like your urgency for Duchess to stop, I wonder if the sound of her barking or the way she's communicating, like she has a sense of urgency in her that's like contributing to your sense of urgency of let's make this stop right now.
For sure. And I think that was the thing that I had mentioned at the beginning, that there's two sides to this, of how we impose urgency. And then the second side is how do the dogs,
Yeah.
I love it when we say the dogs. It's like the birds, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, but the dogs.
Right. Less creepy, more cute.
Yes. Yeah, it'll be a cute movie, I promise. How do their sense of urgency contribute to our own anxiety, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, do you have some examples of that for yourself?
Yeah, well, like barking at things outside, right? The dog is like, there's something there right now. They're gonna murder us all. You need to stop it. Right? And then you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening?
I'm gonna die. Yeah. But seriously, that's how you feel.
Yes.
Sometimes it's so startling. You feel like the earth is shattering.
Yeah, it feels like an emergency, and the dogs feel like it's an emergency.
Absolutely, yeah. And well, sometimes they also just really want to get to something. You sort of mentioned it with Muggins, and whether it's a cat or just going somewhere. Sometimes Duchess does that with going home.
Oh yeah.
Like she has done that before. We're gonna have some dogs barking. It's the whole symphony, just letting you know.
Thank you for the heads up.
Heads up, so you don't feel like the earth is shattering. Listeners.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes they feel like they really need to get somewhere, and like that is stressful.
Yeah.
And that also, if they're pulling on the leash or something because they need to get to that thing across the road or whatever it is, they have a sense of something needs to happen right now, and some impulsivity to get to that. Yeah, so I think, of course, that contributes to our own sense of urgency.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that it's like the dog has a sense of urgency, and then we have a sense of urgency in the opposite direction, right? So the dog is like, I have to get that squirrel right now. And I'm like, I have to stop you from going to that squirrel right now. And it's like we're both in this rigidity of trying to get what
Mhm.
we want immediately, but we want the opposite things. And so we're not working together.
That's a very interesting way of, I've never thought about it like that. And that's where the conflict is coming up. That
Hmm.
there's some conflict between the two of you of like what you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
It's hard.
very,
And then you can't like think about what to do, and you just want to like hold your dog back or get them to sit, and they're not doing it.
yeah, it's just it's stressful. It gets you riled up, right? And I think that's I with Cloud Doodles, I always talk about how living with dogs can be really good for your mental health. And I stand by that 80% of the time. Like 20% of the time, they can really make you feel stressed out also. And
Yeah.
that's a reality. And I think it's important for people to be aware of that also, because otherwise you think that, like dogs are supposed to behave a certain way and like contribute to your life in a certain way. And maybe they're not, I mean, I know they're not going to do all of those expectations. Like they are creatures and they have wants and needs. And yeah, they rub up against what you want also,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Like my dad told me the other day, I'm speaking a lot about my dad right now because I'm living with them, listeners. So that's
Hmm.
why it keeps coming up. He's in my life while we're reconstructing our house.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so that's why I keep mentioning him.
Mhm.
But the other day, so he literally said to me, there's nothing wrong with your dog, speaking about Duchess in a joke, except for her barking. And I said, well, dogs bark, right? Like
Yeah.
that's, I mean, they have a cat. That's why
Yeah.
they have a cat, not a dog.
Yeah. Makes sense.
you know?
Yep.
But anyway, it's just about, yeah, like the expectations of living with a dog. And
Mhm.
the reality is that they can contribute to your sense of urgency or to your anxiety or to your stress levels.
Mhm.
Also,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
okay.
It is totally okay. Yeah. I think a lot of times I think of sensitivity to sound with dog barking, like um and how if you're not aware that you might be sensitive to sound or to a specific types of sounds or specific like frequency or pitches of sound, then it's like you're perceiving that the dog is like contributing to your anxiety, which they are based on how they're sounding. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to like
Well,
name,
like I understand what you're saying. Like they're a trigger.
yeah, yeah, just
So
because
they're
of
not
how the
making you
sound is.
feel anxious. Exactly. Like yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's easy to lose patience when the actual sound is like shifting your nervous system into this fight or flight state because of how sensitive you might be.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
taking a breath. These breaths are good. Urgency culture. Take a
Yeah.
breath.
Does this feel like a good spot to take a break?
I think so. Let's take a break and you'll hear from our sponsors. And then after the break, we will tell you a very cute quote from my daughter that has to do with urgency. And then we're going to talk about ways to combat urgency. And we will finish off with a lovely care tip from Sharon, who will help us um, deal with urgency with our dogs and with us.
Cool. Awesome. We will see you after the break. We are so grateful to Benson's Pet Center for partnering with us on today's episode. Benson's Pet Center is a multi generational, family owned, and operated business with 8 locations in the New York capital region. Benson's has the largest selection of pet food in the area. If they don't have what you're looking for, they'll even order it for you. You can bring your dog with you to pick out their favorite treats, and you can even give them a bath at the self-serve dog wash in 3 of their locations. Benson's has competitive pricing even on subscription services, and I love knowing that my dollars are supporting a local business. The customer service at Benson's is consistently unparalleled, and the staff's extensive knowledge on pet nutrition is amazing. Can't make it out to the store? No problem. Order online before 3 p.m. on weekdays, and Benson's offers same-day delivery. And curbside pickup is available 7 days a week. Benson's Pet Center, where the motto is, we love your pets. Thank you, Benson's. Now back to the show. All right, we are back, and I'm so curious, Angela, to hear this quote from Mara.
So, Mara, our very intelligent and wise 3-year-old, well, she's almost 3.5, has started to say to me when I walk too fast because I'm in a state of urgency. So, for example, I forgot something in the car and I need to go get it, or I need to go downstairs to get something, anything related to like, I'm on a mission and I need to get something. So she has started to say to me, Mom, you're going faster. Relax.
Relax. I love that. Oh, so wise of her to like notice that and point it out to you. That feels like, just like a really important thing to pay attention to.
Yeah. And I think it's coming from a place of like, Mom, I'd like you to slow down and like hold my hand or embrace this moment, like while we're walking to the car, or I would like to, she's really into like pretending like she's an animal now. So like she wants to be Bambi walking down the stairs, and that takes longer than walking on 2 legs, which, my gut reaction is, oh, you're getting in the way of me going to do something that I need to do now. The urgent now, all caps.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, it's a reminder, of course, she says it very clearly, relax, slow down.
Yeah. That's so sweet. And I wonder if it's also like a way that she's saying like she wants to stay connected with you. Like I want you to still be in my world, and you're like pulling me out of it, or pulling yourself out of it.
Absolutely. I think so. So how do our dogs help us slow down? Do they how do they? Well, we were talking about how they can make us speed up sometimes, but we can learn from them also when it comes to urgency. And we already had a great example at the beginning of how Muggins is much more flexible in the way that they interact with the world, or if they're on a mission, they're okay with changing missions.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And along the same lines, Muggins is able to like shift from movement to being still. And the way that they do this is after walks or after hiking, they want to just like pause before transitioning to like going in the house or getting in the car if we've driven to a hiking spot. And it's like very consistent. Like Muggins needs to like just like sit and like watch the yard or watch the neighborhood for a moment or a few minutes before going inside. Or if we're hiking, they seem to want to like just sit in the parking lot and kind of like watch the other people, or I don't know if it's like a sense of like saying goodbye to like this moment or this place before moving on to the next thing.
I love that. I feel like we can all learn from that so much. Just instead of doing these quick transitions in life where we don't even process what just occurred, it's like he's processing the experience that they just had, and then now move on to the next one. And that would be a really great way to be for us humans as well, if we can just take a breath, take a beat to go into the next thing. And to think about the last thing that we just did. I mean, that's mindfulness practice also,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Mindfulness is like a natural thing that Muggins is doing. And it's so, it's so interesting how like the other night we went for a hike in the evening because the leaves are changing color here. And so we had like time to like go to this park. And we got there and it was like a super fast hike because it was like, oh my gosh, the sun is setting, and Muggins was excited, right? So they had urgency when we first got there, and we like walked all over these trails, and then we got back to the car, and it's like, okay, now just like get in the car and go. And Muggins was like, whoa, like I need to just wait a second, and I appreciated that because I was like, at that moment, I really felt the speed that we'd been moving at, and did feel like, whoa, if we just get in the car and go, it kind of feels like, were we even here? Like, did this even happen?
Unless you took a picture and posted it on Instagram.
Right.
Is that just our modern way of processing what's happened? I think so. Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. We have a lot to learn from Muggins. I was just thinking how maybe, my dogs don't do that necessarily, but I was thinking a way that they kind of do, which is when they're resting. And so I think all dogs probably do this. When they're resting, they don't seem like they have anywhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not thinking about it, right? And I've definitely had moments now that I'm thinking about it where I'm running around and they are not. They're just chilling.
Right.
And that, of course, is, the greatest antidote against urgency is just, even when we have everybody running around us, just, it's okay to be the one to say, yeah, I'm resting. Because so much of urgency culture is comparison also, right? Like we're comparing to each other and judging each other. And we talked about that in the last episode about how it's a status symbol to be tired and busy. And so if you're not tired and busy, then what does that mean about you? That you're just sitting around and you're quote unquote lazy. But I don't think so. I think the person sitting around has got it right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the person sitting around is the dog.
Yes, it is the dog.
Yeah.
So we can learn from them in that sense. Also, when we're resting, we're resting.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah.
Rest.
Mm-hmm.
You can run around later.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's always room later to rest. And I mean, if you need to think about rest as productive, like it is, your body is repairing or refueling or processing things. So there's a lot that happens, and we need that. And dogs like need it even more than we do.
Yes, absolutely. And it helps you be productive later. I mean, again, I think we were circling back to the beginning, talking about, authoritative styles of parenting or your traditional obedience training for dogs. It's again that there's this lack of, with those styles, you want immediate results rather than investing in the long term. And rest is investing in the long term. So you might not be seeing the immediate results that you finished your Excel spreadsheet, but later you might finish your Excel spreadsheet more quickly and more efficiently because you took that rest.
Ooh, that is such a great point, that it's like a future investment to rest now. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have any sense of urgency, it should be about resting right now.
I love that.
I urgently need to lay down.
Hurry up and take a nap.
Actually, oh my gosh, you just totally brought this up for me. I have urgency around when I'm falling asleep. And I think other people can relate to this, that I feel like I'm not falling asleep fast enough and it makes me not fall asleep.
Yes.
Like this is very real. Our urgency translates into that, where I'm like, hurry up and fall asleep. Otherwise I'm not going to get enough hours.
Right. Oh my gosh. I feel that so hard.
It just transcends everything. And actually switching into talking about how it relates to the sleep part, I promise. how going through Duchess's training and working with her when she was younger, was understanding that I need to embrace the process. And I think I learned that from her. Embrace the process of her development and that she's not something to be fixed now. And it's the same thing with the sleep, which is why I'm relating it, is I'm learning to embrace the process of sleeping, of falling asleep. And I do that by using mindfulness practices also. Like, you can feel yourself getting deeper and deeper into sleep. And it's actually a very beautiful process. Now, if only I could apply this to my business, I would be extremely zen.
Yes. Oh, that is so important for me to hear, especially in regard to my work of like, yeah, stop pressuring myself to hurry up and get there to wherever there is, with entrepreneurial success, but to like enjoy just going through it.
We miss a lot of that in today's world. A lot of it is the goal, and we don't think about the process. We just want to get there. And like, life is a process. All of it is a process. And so if we slow down and learn to appreciate the process and also accept it, I think that's the ticket to feeling at peace.
There you have it. The meaning of life right there.
Meaning of Life by Angela Tuckerman. I don't even remember what I said, so I'm glad this is recorded.
Okay, so one place that is super hard for me to like embrace the process is Muggins's hygiene care. Especially if there seems to be something about their health that is a concern, right? Like over the summer, like all the time I work on and practice Muggins's hygiene care. And so I'm learning to embrace the process and just enjoy the practice of it. But over the summer, we had a stretch where it was like really dry. And so it was dusty and Muggins's ears got dirty. And Muggins has this like really light skin that like if they're just running around a little bit, their skin turns red. So I looked in their ear one day and it was like red and dirty. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to get an ear infection. And I've got to clean this ear right now to prevent the ear infection. And Muggins was like, no, like we hadn't gotten there in our practicing to the point of like being able to clean it with Muggins opting in and saying yes. And so they were like, no. And then I felt really conflicted, like, well, I want to listen to Muggins and honor their no, but also it seems to me like if I don't clean the ear right now, that it's going to get infected. And I like caught myself, I fell into that trap of like believing that was the only outcome that was going to happen, and that I definitely needed to clean it right now, and there was no other way.
Yeah, I hear that. I think many of us can relate to that, and that's a hard one because there's an anxiety about Muggins not being okay.
Yeah.
And I think we can rush through things when we feel anxious about somebody not being okay, which can make us make errors also, right? Like, that's the other thing about urgency is we when we feel in a state of urgency, it's okay to make mistakes, but we make more mistakes, I think. Which is, there's, again, it's okay to make mistakes, but you would rather not make mistakes in those particular situations. And so I think, yeah, now you may have felt, regrettably that like, oh, I may have hurt my relationship with Muggins and it could have waited. And if you hadn't felt that sense of urgency, then you wouldn't have made that decision.
Right. Yeah, I did. I mean, I did decide to clean the ear, and I offered Muggins like a bowl of steak. I was like, if you let me clean your ear, I will give you this bowl of steak. And they were like, oh, I really don't want to do that. But they did it. They ate the steak and I flushed the ear, and they didn't get an infection. and there is a consequence. Like now we have to we went backward in our ear care training and had to rebuild the trust. And we're still not to a point where Muggins will be like, oh yeah, you can, wipe my ear with that wet cotton pad or pour ear cleaner in my ear. Like they're like, no. And so I was like, wow, that was a really hard choice. And did I choose the right thing? Like Muggins didn't get an ear infection, but there was a consequence to our relationship and our ability to move through that care.
I mean, that's just a hard one because you'll never know. Maybe they would have had an ear infection, So that's a difficult, I mean, that's a very difficult example where there is the sense of urgency because something may actually be wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I wonder, was there maybe another way, or if I wait 24 hours, can an ear infection develop that quickly? Or maybe, I don't know,
and the sense of urgency made you act quickly, instead of waiting and thinking and pausing. Which even in emergencies, there needs to be a moment where you are thinking about what you're doing, not just doing. Otherwise you can make mistakes,
Exactly. Yeah. I think sometimes what I'm really trying to learn from Muggins is that okay, if they're saying no to this, is there a different way I can do it? Or can I wait a little bit, but not forever, one time Tom and I were over the summer, we were also training Muggins for opting in to get injections so they could get vaccinated. And one evening we were like, okay, we have time now. And so we set up our training area and we were all ready. And then we were like, okay, Muggins, come on in. And Muggins didn't come. And so I went in the other room and Muggins was upside down on their back, waiting for belly rubs. They were like, I'm doing this right now. And so I was like, I really wanted to do this training right now. But I was like, okay, I'll give Muggins some belly rubs. And then they wanted to go for a walk. And after the walk, we came back and then Muggins went right into the kitchen and put their head down in the spot, to say, I'm ready for injection practice. And I was like, oh, now you're ready. And we had a great training session.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it just is these examples just show that slowing down and not making such swift decisions based on urgency, and embracing the process, because part of this was embracing the process. You will get to what needs to be done. I think that's what we're learning from Muggins here. Yeah. We will get there. We will get to clean your ear, or we will take you to a vet if there's something severely wrong. We will get to this training. I think that's the hardest thing I struggle with urgency in general, is the feeling of it'll never get done.
Yeah.
And it will, even if it doesn't happen today, I'll do it tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. There's always time to do it.
Yes.
You have all the time that you need to get it
done. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a care tip to share. Would you like to hear about it?
Yes, I'm very excited.
Okay. So this care tip is about rewarding your dog for both saying yes and when they say no. And that is a really hard thing to do, because if your dog isn't saying yes, then they're saying no, and that means you can't do, or they're not going to do whatever it is you want them to do at that moment. And it also seems this goes against the way I was trained to be a trainer, of if your dog doesn't do it right away, you have to punish them. This is rewarding them for not doing it right away, which seems counterintuitive, because then it's well, why would my dog ever choose to say yes if they just get rewarded for saying no? But what you're rewarding is your dog's appropriate communication when they say no, because you know how people will always say like, oh, my dog bit me out of the blue, or like there was no warning, this all of a sudden happened. I think that can be more likely when the dog doesn't have lots of ways that they can say no, or they haven't been listened to when they've said no in more subtle ways, and then their patience runs out or their tolerance runs out, and they growl or bark or bite. So it's important to reward them when they say no in smaller ways, like if they just back up or look away from you, or if they growl.
So can you tell us
Oh, yeah.
how are we how do you reward for the yes and how do you reward for the no?
Yeah. So what I do, I practice this a lot with Muggins's hygiene care routine. And I will use two different types of treats. So I'll have a high value treat. This one that I like from small batch is like freeze dried organ meats. So like chicken hearts or pork hearts, or liver or something like that. Dogs generally really like that stuff. You can also use like fresh meat or cheese. That tends to be very high value for dogs. So the yes gets a high value treat. If they say yes and let you hold their paw or look in their ear or clip their nail or brush them, or if they get in the tub to take a bath, they get the high value treat. And then if they say no by not giving you their paw or not saying yes to like letting you look in their ear, or if they don't climb in the tub, you give them a lower value treat. So sometimes I'll use Charlie Bears, which just is like a kind of like a cracker type treat. Or popcorn is another good one, or the dog's kibble, if you want to use their kibble as a treat. So something low value that's not meaty and stinky and delicious, but they still get something for saying no. So that way they don't have to do what you asked in order to eat. And also, like I said, you're rewarding them for communicating in an appropriate way that they are not ready for something.
Instead of like growling or biting or
Yeah.
like saying no in a way that's like risky to other people's and dog's safety.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like it's kind of like saying thank you when a person says no to you.
Right.
Like, oh, thanks for telling me. Like that makes it easier for the person to say no, so that they feel like, oh, it's okay for me to do that, instead of feeling like, oh, if I say no, I'm going to get punished.
And so in the long run, you think that this can reduce behaviors that are, yeah, like I said, like unsafe behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds really great. I think everybody should be doing this then.
Yeah. It just helps the dog to feel like they have a choice, and having a choice automatically reduces anxiety.
Yeah.
And then when dogs are less anxious and less stressed, they are going to behave better and more safely.
Great. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate it. So that wraps up our 2 episodes on urgency. It was very fun and interesting to think about urgency for the last month with you.
Yeah.
While we're talking and while we're not. And let's get into some updates with our businesses.
Yeah, what's Cloud Doodles got going on?
Cloud Doodles, what is going on? Well, we went to our first trade show last weekend, which was crazy and fun at the same time. I came back with my feet falling off and so overstimulated, but a very warm and enlarged heart. So that was really fun. So we're actually going to do another one in Turin if there are any listeners that are near Italy. In November 17th and 18th. And other than that, we've got some Christmas collections coming out around the corner. Christmas is almost here. I can't believe it. And yeah, sign up for my newsletter and follow me on socials for updates.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's
what about you? What do you have going on?
I was so delighted to be a guest on the Wag Out Loud podcast.
Ooh.
The episode just dropped yesterday. So Wag Out Loud provides support to dog guardians to be able to like have knowledge and resources to advocate for their dog's health and well-being. And so they do a lot of episodes on like different dog health topics, nutrition, behavior, different products, and they've got a great like library of resources with discount codes on their website, wagoutloud.com. And so my episode is about co-regulation, and we talk about how what trauma is and how that shows up in humans and in dogs, and how co-regulating with your dog can support you in managing stress and cultivating your trauma recovery, and can also support your dog in managing stress and moving through trauma as well.
Sounds awesome. And can we listen to that on any podcast platform?
Yeah, it's on any podcast platform. It's the latest episode, so it should be right at the top. And it's called Wag Out Loud. And I also give a 20% off discount code for all of my offerings at the end of the episode. So make sure you get that.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
All right. So we'll see you next time for our next episode, which will be on a new topic for humans to be decided.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Even though we are licensed professionals in our own field of work, Angela, LCSW, Sharon, OTD, and CDBC, this podcast is not intended to replace individual therapy for humans or behavior support for dogs. We approach our conversations from an exploratory, observational, and strictly personal lens.
If you are struggling with your mental health, your dog's behavior, or if you or your dog have experienced a recent traumatic event, please see the resources section on our websites for a list of resources and places that can help. Visit either www.hc-collab.com/happydoghappyhuman or www.cloudddoodles.com/happydoghappyhuman. This podcast is made possible by the collaboration between Cloud Doodles and Human Canine Collaborative. Check out our websites at www.cloudddoodles.com or www.hc-collab.com. Special thanks to Tom Fox at Tom Fox Photos for support with editing and production consulting. You can find Tom at tomfoxphotos.com. Also, special thanks to sound effects and story examples from Duchess and Muggins. We could not and would not ever want to do this without you.